Hey everybody, happy Thursday. It is Thursday, right? I swear to God, I'm losing days and I don't want to. How's everybody doing? Make sure you're dropping your highs. Drop and say, hey, I'm here, Shola. I can see the numbers going up. So please say hello. How's everybody doing? It's only been 2 days since I've seen you. And yes, the world went cray. There's been some crazy stuff happening. I am really looking forward to us having our guest discussion in about 30 minutes, where we'll be having a frank conversation about what is going on in South Africa. Now, I'm hoping that there will be many more conversations like this, and this is the first of many. So please don't think that this is going to be the first and last or the conclusion. Absolutely not. But I do think that what we're witnessing must be discussed. It's already been discussed on social media and outside social media in different circles. So why not here? Yes. So I'm really looking forward to all of you, engaging. Please remember to drop your questions or any comments you may have, because I think it's really, really important that we have this conversation. Now, folks, please get your cup of teas, your juices, and your drinks, okay? Because this is going to, I'm hoping we really engage on a number of things that are happening. So let me first of all start with this. So how many of you are aware that King Charles is in the States on his royal tour? I think he's finished the States now. He's somewhere else. I don't keep up with what's going on with the royal family, right? But how can you not keep up when this is all the media talks about? So what I particularly find fascinating and really interesting, okay, is Zoran. I like Zoran Mamdani, okay? And he's been doing really well, hasn't he? His first 100 days, I think he's been hitting the ball out of the park. Yes, there are areas that we should give him constructive criticism on, because why not? The fact that you like a politician doesn't mean you cannot give them constructive criticism if you think they're veering off road. And I expect that he should expect that. No problem. But here I found it fascinating that he was asked this question at a presser before he met King Charles here. Okay, so this was for the 9/11 commemoration, and King Charles was going to be there. And of course, as mayor of New York, Zoran Mamdani was going to be there too. And Zoran was asked this question. Let me see if I can.
Thing you might say if you say hello to him and he's
Hold on one second. Let me see what's happening with my technology, because you all know what it's like. Let's see if this will show up now.
If I was
let me start this again.
You haven't thought about anything you might say if you say hello to him and he stops to chat?
if I was to speak to the king separately from that, I would probably encourage him to return the Kohinoor diamond.
Okay.
Thank you, Melissa.
You haven't thought about anything.
You have to love Zoran. This guy is always freaking present. He's just present. He's right there. And what you didn't catch was that earlier, there was an earlier question about what he would discuss with King Charles, and he talked about the fact that they were going to be there for to memorialize 9/11 and those who had been killed in that catastrophe, in that tragedy. He was going to cover that, okay? And then they pressed on with, well, is there anything else you'd want to talk to him about? And he's like, yeah, if there's an opportunity to speak to him outside that main fact, I would ask him to return the Kohinoor diamond. I mean, this guy is on point. This guy, now, Zoran is Indian, he's Ugandan, he's American, and I love the way he does not drop any of his representations or identities, because this is how you do it. You don't. He always seems like he's ready to go there, and that I really, really appreciate. He always seems like he's consistently ready to go there, and nobody would have been expecting him, especially this the journalist, wouldn't have been expecting him to want to say to the King of England, yeah, I would like to encourage you to return what your ancestors stole from my ancestors. Thank you very much. You love to see it. This is what I'm talking about. This right here is what I'm talking about. We need more people who are not afraid to speak truth to power. It doesn't matter that they're politicians, that they know how to deliver what needs to be delivered. and he's not hiding it. I thoroughly love that. People, drop your hellos. Let me know who's in town. I can see your emojis and likes and all of that. Yeah, listen, Tev, you're absolutely right. Tev says he just gave it raw. He didn't mince his words. You gotta love it. It's just like when he was in the White House and he called Trump a fascist to his face. We love it because this is what we're talking about. You don't all of a sudden stop speaking truth to power because it might be uncomfortable, for the recipient. Like, who cares? This is exactly what we're talking about. This is what we want to see from politicians. And he's not being rude. He's not being disrespectful. He's being respectful to his heritage, to his culture. He's being respectful to decolonizing what is clearly, a colonized history. And you start by saying, Britain, return what you stole. It isn't yours. Because I won't lie, every time you see the royal family parade with the jewelry and the artifacts that were stolen, right? It's a slap in the freaking face when they come out and say things like, oh, they've never actually apologized for slavery, but they'll come out and almost like commiserate with the losses and the tragedy that slavery was, that colonization was. They do all that and still don't do jack all, because if they really meant what they said about, being regretful and, not wanting to commiserate and want to be part of the journey of reconciliation, then return what you stole. You can't continue to benefit from the legacy of savagery, of looting, of theft, and then claim to be, I don't know, some supremely morally, standing human being. Bullshit. Utter bullshit. Yeah, Zamdi says he is brave. Good on him, love. I totally agree. Totally agree. Good on him. And I think that for many of us, politicians like Zoran Mamdani are their breath of fresh air. Seriously, seriously. Sometimes we want politicians who can give as good as they get. We also want politicians who are not afraid to say what needs to be said. We also want politicians who are savvy enough to be able to navigate the murky waters of politics, of how language can be violence, and of how they put themselves at risk every single time when they speak truth to power, because they know when they do so, those who do not want to relinquish power will come after them. Lauren says change is coming to America. Let's hope so. Let's hope so, because you know what? When Obama became president, we all hoped that meant change was coming to America. What did it do? It ushered in Donald Trump. Donald Trump isn't change, not by any stretch of the imagination. He's the worst kind of change anybody could possibly have been anticipating. But having the first Black president did a number on the racists and white supremacists. It did a big, fat number on them. They could not have it again. They went, they lost their freaking marbles, which is what led to them putting someone like Donald Trump in the White House for the first term, and they brought him back again. I mean, there's absolutely no way and no other explanation for the fact that whenever we expect change, there's going to be pain. It's like labor, right? For those of us who've had the pleasure and blessing of pushing a human being out of our punani, we know what that is. There's a blessing, which is the child, but going through that labor is painful, right? So yeah, I hope there will be change, not just in America, but in the United Kingdom as well. Because I can tell you right now that the politically, the chicken-livered coward political prostitute that we have as Keir Starmer, as Prime Minister, he freaking needs to go. He's not the leader our time needs, and he's not the leader, period. So I'm hoping that this upcoming May 7th local elections is the step in the right direction to send in the right message. But I've learned to manage my expectations, okay? The Brexit elections and the last election, I just went, this is it's not doing my mental health any good, because I keep expecting people to do something different. And that is a definition of insanity. Why would they vote different when the mess and chaos that is That's quite frankly, the system that runs this world is what they benefit from. It's just insane. Now, talking about Obama, I want you to check out this video that Obama did because I cannot believe he did this. Hold on. Let's see this come up. He was asked a question.
But here's the. But here's the. I'm happy to talk about this if it's a part of the question, but again, some rules around how we talk. Well,
the question he was asked here was whether or not what is happening in Gaza is a genocide. They asked him straight up if what is happening in Gaza is a genocide, and this is what the first Black president of the United States has to say. Again,
but here's the. I'm happy to talk about this if it's a part of the question, but again, some rules around how we talk. Well, yes, there are disasters and catastrophes everywhere, sir.
Please.
This is such a disappointing response from Barack Hussein Obama. This is such a disappointing response from somebody who I've highly respected. You were asked a simple question: is it genocide or not? And you are stuttering, stammering, and then coming up with dumbass statements like there are rules to how we talk about it. It's a yes or freaking no. And I bet you anything that if the question posed to him had been October 7th this, Hamas that, he would have had a freaking answer to give. This really disappointed me. Really, really disappointed me. And it opens your eyes to what really guides our leaders of today. Because if you cannot outrightly call what Israel is doing in Gaza a genocide, then you're a freaking genocide apologist. You're part of the freaking problem. That it's been 3 freaking years, at least almost 3 freaking years. We can see Israel is still continuing to commit war crime after war crime, especially now in Lebanon. How are you in a position not to be able to categorically state that's freaking genocide? That's a war crime. How is this difficult? This is what I'm struggling with, because if you can't even speak truth when it's blatantly obvious in your face, then why should we trust you on anything else? It's just crazy to me. It's sad. It is disappointing. It's disconcerting. And quite frankly, it's enraging, because the very people that you think have been positioned and privileged to be in a position of leadership, that you feel you can trust them, especially in a world where we are being gaslighted and lied to on a daily basis. It is really sad. It's very, very disappointing. I expected so much better from Barack Obama of all people. Come on. Papa Yim says Obama is part of the ruling class. He won't go against his own. I mean, he's definitely part of the leadership. I'll say he's definitely a global leader. Okay, and I think that it is things like this that make us start to doubt the character and integrity of those that we respect. I draw the line at genocide. I draw the line at genocide. I mean, you can't tell me what we have been witnessing for almost 3 years isn't evil, isn't inhumanity. It isn't the worst reflection of human beings possible. You can't tell me that. And there are no rules to talking about inhumanity. There are no rules to talking about stuff. Somebody asked you a damn question, answer the damn question, especially when it's an important one. That wasn't a frivolous question. That wasn't a throwaway question. That wasn't a question, oh, I better, ignore it. That's a question that was going to go freaking viral. That, he can't hide behind his social media accounts where he may choose or not choose to answer a question. where he can couch his words very carefully, without appearing to stammer or stutter or, or have to think about. He's asked a question that I have no doubt in my mind in almost 3 years, he should have answered by now. He's a lawyer. Yes, he's a politician, but I believe he trained as a lawyer. So how is it impossible that he doesn't have the answer to that question? I know that to me was very disappointing. It's one of the reasons why I was very, very disappointed with Kamala Harris as well, because there's no excuse. There's literally no excuse at all. Okay, Cheribe says, good to be here. Good to have you here. Who else is dropping by to say hello? I said to you guys, in a few minutes, we're going to be having our guest discussion where we'll be talking about South Africa. We'll be talking about all the things that we are seeing down, live streamed onto our devices. And I'm sure, like me, you're wondering what the heck is going on in South Africa. We all want to see and understand what's going on. And it is true that all of us would have made, we'll all have a first instinct as we're watching people being beaten up, as we're watching people being kicked out of hospitals. And all of us would have an instinct to have a reaction to it. You don't have to agree with what the first reaction is, and you don't have to agree with or disagree. But I think it's important to have this conversation because it is not good seeing what we are seeing. Well, and I'm hoping that the guests on the panel will be able to bring, a broad perspective, and that we can engage in a way that is unfiltered, but still respectful. Okay, we will try. We will try to do that. Raquel says, keep on calling it out for what it is. We must always say the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. I agree with you. I totally agree with you. Because some of these things are just pure. It's just pure madness at this point. It makes no sense to me. It really doesn't. Now, I don't know how many of you have been, keeping an eye on what's going on in London. And I think, oh yeah, that's Obama again. Honestly, I don't even, it's not like I know Obama personally, but if, yeah, let me say your name properly. Inyari Rangwe says Obama fumbled, and I agree. Obama fumbled there. He did. And I'm sure by now that he would have seen that clip has, gone viral. And quite frankly, he should have done better. He should have done way, way better than that, because that was just disappointing. That was not to be had. Okay, so just to touch on the fact that there's still some more crazy stuff happening, right? I know that wait, hold on one second. I don't know why I've come up with right. This is now. Do you guys have a couple of minutes before our guests come on, and we're going to get into, do you have questions you like us to touch on during the South Africa discussion? If you do, can you just drop it in the message box and just DM so I can raise that with them? Because as I said, I think it's really important that now be the time that we are able to engage. Hey, Jennifer. How we doing? How you doing? Good to see you. So please, if you have questions or observations, I would say observations that you think it would be good to cover, right? Observations that you think will be good to cover during the discussion, please, can you just drop it in now? And let me see what you're thinking, and then we can help to direct the conversation on South Africa in that direction. And I think it is really important because, as I said earlier, I have a view of what I'm seeing. I'm hoping that through this conversation, my understanding can be broadened. Okay. And I'm sure many of us are thinking that. I'm hoping that. So in a few minutes, when we have the guests on, I would like it to be that we are able to cover as many points as possible. I think it's really important to be able to do that, because why not? And this is an opportunity to do so. Now, Have you guys been following Erica Kirk? You know, Charlie Kirk's wife. She so she came out with a recent response, or how best to describe it, to talk about what people are saying about her, and how she's not happy with what, you know. She talked about Candace Owens. She talked about Drewski doing a black face, no, white face. And when she said white face, what the heck is white face? White face isn't a thing. Because when did whiteface become a thing? It's not a name. It doesn't have any history behind it. Blackface is a thing. There's a reason it's called blackface. It's a history of racism, trauma, dehumanization. I mean, there's no freaking comparison. So when she called it whiteface, I had to smile and go, you know, white people trying to claim of, you know, false equivalence of oppression. It's just you just have to laugh. You just have to laugh, because it's sometimes it's better to laugh or you shout, right? If not, it's just wahala. It's just wahala there. And by wahala, I mean problem. There's no problem. Wahala means, you know, problem for those who are still on the Niger pidgin speaking. So I wanted to actually share with you what she had said, and I was hoping that I could do that if you give me a second. I do want you to send me your questions. Are you dropping your questions in? Because if you're not dropping your questions, don't then say, "Ah, Dr. Shola, but you didn't." You did not. You didn't ask the questions I wanted asked. So tell me now. Tell me now, because if you don't tell me now, then, you know, you have to forever hold your peace. So please drop your questions and let me see them so that I know to ask them that. Okay. All right. It doesn't look like I can show you that anyway. It doesn't matter. It don't matter. We will soon have them. Let me see questions. Let me see who else is on here with us. What's going on with Louise Valentine? Because I can. Now, I don't know who Louise Valentine is. How are you still getting airtime? Is that your question to me? On my page? On my channel? Welcome, Louise, and enjoy the show. Enjoy my airtime. Can you see what I'm not doing? I'm not kicking you out, because why should I? You know, there's no need. You might as well enjoy the show. And if me having airtime upsets you, that's your prerogative. This is me doing some Bobby Brown. All right. Strength 1152 says, I'm here, my sister from the motherland. Hey, I hope that you're blessed and highly favored in Jesus' name. Amen. I am. And I hope you are too. Oh, yes. So I see your question, Jen. Jen says, what's with this rise in xenophobia? Now, it's interesting that some comments I've seen on my posts from some South Africans, they've said they don't see this as xenophobia. And I think that's an interesting perspective, whether you agree with it or not, because I'm seeing it as xenophobia, but there are some South Africans who say, no, it's not xenophobia. So maybe our guests will be able to shed some light on why some South Africans do not see it as xenophobia. Hibarok says xenophobia is happening because of the illegal foreigners are doing all kinds of crimes. It's more difficult to catch them because they aren't documented. But that is an interesting take. And I hope to explore that with the guests in about 4 minutes. Because when you say that, then how are you making a distinction between the foreigners? Because not all foreigners are committing all kinds of crimes, right? I've been to South Africa, Cape Town and Joburg. So if you see me and you find out that, oh, she's Nigerian, are you going to all of a sudden say, you know, oh yeah, she must be committing crimes? The videos we're seeing is that there is no distinction between documented and undocumented. That is what it appears to be. And that's why I think these conversations are important. Yeah, Strength says, I'm here for pure education and knowledge. God bless you. Because that's what we should all be here for. And still make up your own mind. I mean, nobody should tell you what's what. I always give you my opinion, but I'm hoping that when we form our opinions, we're forming our opinions based on information. And it should be information that is as, I would say, as varied as possible, because somewhere in all of that information, in all of the pieces of information, will be the truth. And I think that is what is truly important, right? I think that is, more importantly, that is what is important. So, I mean, we take it from there. So as we're waiting for our guests to come on, they will soon be here. All of them will be here shortly. I know Farah is here already, and we just wait for a couple more minutes, and then we bring them all on. Now, don't forget, drop your comments and your questions so I can see them. Thank you. I can see more numbers coming on. That's fantastic. More numbers, more viewers. All right, let me just take a sip of water. Honestly, because I want to listen. I'm going to try and do more listening than talking. Do you think that would be hard for me? Do you think that would be hard for me? Because my husband always says he wishes I did more listening. And when I finish listening and talk, it's like I'm in there like, no, but this doesn't. It's like, just hold on and listen first. So I'm going to try and do more listening than talking. So it's let's see. This is an interesting comment from Goji C. You've called South Africans despicable names already. What truth are you looking for when your mind is made up? Okay, so I call the acts despicable because, yes, it is despicable to kick children out of school. And yes, it is despicable to go into hospitals and tell people, if you're not South African, get out. That is despicable. Freaking, and that is what I commented on. So when you ask me, what truth are you looking for when your mind is made up? I've responded to the clips that I've seen. If there is a rational, legitimate reason behind it, which I struggle to think, but if there is, I'm opening to hear. And not only am I opening to hear, I'm open to engaging in a conversation. Because to my mind, and I've been on earth quite a while, this is not the first time I'm going to see acts like this. It's not the first time I see people being discriminated against or being, children being attacked because yada, yada. It's not the first time. So when I see it, I call it out. If there is some kind of reason that people think justifies that behavior, let me hear it. I'll hear it. And if I disagree, I will still tell you I disagree. There's no wahala because that's the whole point of having conversations like this. It's really, really important that we do so. Hey, Barox, are you making fun of my... In fact, I usually have a bigger one. I usually have a bigger one. So, but you know what? We do need our glasses of water. Listen, I'm going to start to get our guests in because oh my God, we have at least 3. Everybody show some love. We have Farai. Hello, my brother. How are we doing? Oh, hey, show some love, Chanel. Look at you guys. Oh, look at how beautiful. Looking beautiful. The Nigerian in me is coming out, people. Just receive the love. You know, we tend to exaggerate welcome and greetings. It's just in our spirits, okay? How are you all doing? I can't thank you enough for being here with me today. I really appreciate it. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And listen, everybody, can you please just show some love? Show some love to our guests today. Okay, we're expecting 2 more. They'll be here shortly, but show some love and don't forget to put down your comments and stuff. We have Farah Ian Muvuti. We've got Gloria Ayo. We've got Chanel Olivia. And I do want you guys to say a few things about yourselves, because you know what I'm trying to do today. I don't have a set of questions because what I want as much as possible. Can you hear me okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
What I want as much as possible is for us to have free-flowing conversation. Does that make sense? I want it to be as free flowing because we are brothers and sisters here. And please don't worry, if we need to disagree, let's agree to disagree. This is all part of the conversation that we want to have. Okay. Chanel, let me start with you. I want to hear your voice. If you guys aren't following Chanel, what the hell are you doing? You need to follow her account on Instagram. Education, education, education. You can't go wrong. And you know what, Chanel? It's the way you deliver your videos.
Very
I mean, how do you just do that with such grace? And it's not like you're using any, I don't know, powerful technology. It's just your voice, the tenor and the tone of your voice. You know, I talk and my kids are like, Mommy, do you have to shout? Or you speak and people want to listen to you. So please, just for a few seconds, just tell us about you while we wait for our tour.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, Dr. Shola. And I'm just so thankful to just be sitting on a panel with people who are like-minded and whose life's purpose is to really advance and to raise up the issues that are affecting all of us in the diaspora. So thank you so much. Of course, I've also followed your work and I love your passion. It is something that you can feel through the phone or through whatever device you're viewing your work from. So thank you so much for considering me to be on your panel. I do appreciate it.
Oh, no. It is an honor to have you here. And sis, that hairstyle. Okay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
It is eating. As you can see, this is not your regular like mainstream platform, blah, blah, blah. What we do here is we are as real as the good Lord made us. So if we want to admire hair, we shall say we admire the hair. Okay. Gloria, our sis. Look how fine you're looking. That heart is sitting very nicely. Oh, I love it. Now, if you guys aren't following Gloria, in the name of God in heaven, what are you doing? Because, you know, one of the things I love about your videos is I love how you deliver sarcasm with facts. It's like, I'm like, she just slapped somebody there. Did you see that? So please just tell us, you know, just for a few minutes, just tell us for a few seconds about yourself.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's like I can't resist the urge, and I know what you mean about trying to speak sweetly, you know, like Chanel does. And child, I'll be a little too passionate sometimes. I'm like, no. But thank you so much, and of course, you're stunning. Thank you for having us. You know, the first thing I said to you when when we communicated was thank you for using your platform. You know, so we might, you will get comments, and I'm sure you have already, where people say mind your business, but no, what happens in one region of Africa affects us all. But I am an African diaspora storyteller and analyst, and anything to do with Africa or people of African descent, there shall I be. That's it. And I'm sorry, I just saw the email requesting how I wanted to be addressed. I went there to get the link and I saw it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean not to see it.
Oh, no worries. And I just thought actually sometimes it's best for people to hear directly from you guys than me sounding like some, well, hello there, welcome to the show. It's so, you know, it just feels very robotic. I tend to get stuck. In fact, I've just done to you what I hate people do to me. I hate it when I go on any maybe platform and they go, so Dr. Shola, can you tell us about yourself? And I will not lie to you. Let me tell you, the first thing that comes to my mind is, well, I like jollof rice. And I know that is not what they're asking me about, but I cannot for the life of me think of anything other than, oh yeah, and I've got 3 daughters who drive me up the wall. That's not what they're asking me for. So I usually go, please don't ask me to talk about myself.
This was good though, thank you.
No worries. Farah Ian Muvuti. Now, Farah came highly recommended by Kim Heller, who we're going to see this evening. And Farah, your articles, he writes articles, he's a writer and author, and you're also the CEO of a SET, I believe, named organization. Please tell us about yourself.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I thank whoever, Kim, I think Kim Heller is the one who recommended it.
Yes, Kim Heller, yes.
Appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to meet the ladies here. And I will be following you as soon as this is done, so I can equally learn from you guys. So my name is Farah Ian Muvuti. I'm the CEO of the Southern African Times. And we're basically a publication based, headquartered here in London, but we do have bureaus in Zimbabwe, South Africa, as well as Rwanda, and we're rolling out in Nigeria. And our interests are predominantly African capital markets and how we're representing ourselves and telling that story about economic development that is driven predominantly by Africa and its subsequent impact on the global economy. Because we've seldom heard stories that that provide nuance to the African economy. Or what we tend to hear is more the charity that is the hegemony of dominance from the global north to how they sort of paternally take care of us. Yet we've been growing our economy for many years, and we're building a strong SME base, a strong investment base that is driven predominantly by African governments. So that's our area of interest. And in terms of my work, I sort of lead the company and lead the team towards our growth trajectory to further expand our vision. And our vision is quite simple. We want to be able to compete for market share with companies such as Bloomberg and your FTs within the African context, and so that we become the leading storytellers when it comes to Africa's economy, because there's a strong story to tell, and we're simply excited to tell it.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm hoping our other two guests will join us shortly. I know the thing, guys, is I think that the time difference thing also plays a role, but hopefully it's not too bad because these two guests are in South Africa.
They are in South Africa.
Yeah, so I hope we did not get the timing too wrong. But let's start anyway. Let's start by starting the conversation, and hopefully they join us shortly. What is going on in South Africa? Okay, I think that hopefully by starting with Africans, then when the South Africans come in, we carry on the conversation. So, Gloria, let's start with you. What do you think is going on?
Yeah, and I'm really glad you're asking that direct question, because the content creator, I've been doing this for roughly 3 years now, and I'm going to be very honest. Every time I have spoken on South Africa, no matter how this comes across, it is nothing but love for you. Every time I have spoken with South Africa, long before this, the first time I ever spoke about Operation Dudula, that's the political party that's spearheading this movement against foreigners. Yes. Every time I've spoken, it's not been received well. But that has never stopped me from speaking up for you. When it has to do with, the propaganda against you, and that is propaganda, what they've said about South Africans, Black South Africans targeting Afrikaners, we've been, in front of the battle, we've been there pushing and taking all these hits from Afrikaners, so it's not personal. And, when you say we don't know your history and what we're sharing is propaganda, that is absolutely false. It's not things that we're making up. Like the video that I did that was showing the countries that stood by South Africa, I didn't make any of that up. The records are in the OAU Liberation Committee, or rather the OAU Liberation Committee had records of it. That was held at the African Union Commission headquarters in Addis Ababa. They're publicly accessible. The Nigerian Southern Africa Relief Fund is documented in Nigerian federal government records and in academic papers that were published by universities in both Nigeria and South Africa. That's just an example. Nelson Mandela himself wrote about it in his autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom. That was published in 1994, and he mentioned the countries that stood by South Africa. We can't say that Mandela is spreading propaganda about his own liberation struggle. And people say, oh, let's not talk about Mandela. This is about South Africans. I don't think it's also fair to dismiss him completely and remove him from the story, because at the end of the day, that man did fight to get South Africa here. But I want to balance things by saying there's always been nothing but love. In the past, I'm not going to lie. I can't lie about this. I have experienced the love from South Africans firsthand. I went viral in 2010 in South Africa before viral became a thing. I know what that love is. I have been to South Africa. So to see this switch is confusing. And this is all we're trying to address. You can say it has nothing to do with that we have no business speaking on it. But what is going on is affecting all Africans. And we're all saying to you something that is happening. I'm just going to pause here for now because I know other people, have to go. But It's not personal. We're coming from a place of concern. It is because we love you enough that we're telling you the truth. We can't see what is happening and go silent or just feed it to you the way you want it.
Listen, everything you just said is facts because I've been to South Africa myself. I've been to Joburg and to Cape Town, and it's been nothing but love. And especially growing up, in Nigeria, where during a time where I remember being in school, and literally what was going on in South Africa, Free Winnie Mandela, all of that, all that was going on with Nelson Mandela, we felt it. And even as a young child, while I did not have all of the facts, I knew something was wrong and I knew something needed to be done. So I think like you just said, many of us have a connection with South Africa that we can't actually articulate because growing up, it was just fused, right there. Chanel, what do you think?
Yeah, I feel like African Americans and South Africans are kindred spirits in a lot of ways, because of course we know that the apartheid regime came to study apartheid in the American South, in the United States. And so they really began to understand how to effectively dehumanize and ostracize peoples from what was happening here amongst the African American community. So a lot of the issues that I see that are happening in South Africa, but I want to be really careful to not ostracize South Africa in this conversation. Yeah. I think that we have to all understand that what we see, that it is really just an effect of colonialism. And it comes out in this way because South Africa sits on a fairly large global stage, because they have a fairly large economy, that they are the center of a lot of the music scene that we're seeing right now. Yeah. And so they hold a space that gives them a lot of eyes. They have a lot of eyes on them. Similar to African Americans. We represent a very small number of African people in the diaspora, but because we sit in the belly of the American empire, we have a lot of the spotlight on us. So a lot of what we do and say gets broadcast across the world, and people begin to see African people in the diaspora through the eyes and the lives of African Americans. Yes. And so I just want to really be careful that we don't ostracize South Africans and point a finger at them, because as we point a finger at what we're seeing, we can also point 4 fingers back at ourselves. We understand that anti-Black racism is something that is not only something that we have dealt with, but it's also something that we in all of that diaspora perpetrate against one another. Yeah. Here in the United States, and the reason why the video that I came out with not only pointed to what happened with that one incident, but it also talked about, the history of anti-Black sentiment amongst one another, whether it was Nigerian to Ghanaian or Ghanaian to Nigerian, or African American to one another, or to other migrant communities that are coming here to the US. Recently in the US, we've had an influx of migrants coming from South America, and they are coming to the United States because the United States has put forth policies that has made it absolutely impossible for other people to live in their own countries. Let's be clear. Nobody that's coming from Venezuela is in a hurry to move to a place like New York City or Delaware. It's cold there, it's expensive there. Venezuela has nice weather. People don't want to be rich, they want to be able to feed their families and be able to live a decent life. And when you're not able to do that, you will walk through the Amazon desert, which is what these migrants are doing to get to the United States of America. And so as that happens, we see marginalized communities similar to the African American, like the African American community, watching the Venezuelans, watching the Colombians have access to social programs that they feel like they should have access to. But what I'm saying is that instead of, and I'm going to use African Americans because I know that many South Africans feel as though they're being piled up on, and that is not what we need to do. Many African Americans felt like, why should these people have access to these programs? And we've been here for all these years and we need help. My thing is that looking at the poor person next to you is not them. The issue is the system that has created the poverty, because the poverty is manufactured. It's manufacturing the poverty for the benefit of maintaining control. So what we understand is that Zimbabweans and Nigerians and people throughout the continent of Africa who who are traveling to South Africa are not the problem. Frans Fanon talked about it in his book, The Wretched of the Earth, and he talked about that our dignity is tied to land. You know, our humanity is tied to land. As an African American, I don't have a connection to land that my grandparents, 20 generations have, because I was trafficked to the Americas, and then my ancestors are survivors of the transatlantic slave trade. But for South African people who've been there for generations and centuries and centuries, so much of their identity is tied to that land. And when that land was taken from them, so that white people who had welcomed themselves to a country that did not belong to them and seized land that was not theirs to take, when they took that land, they took more than land. They took identity. They took a person's dignity. And so the truth of the matter is that the people who need to have the focus, who we need to be focusing on, are not, you know, the migrants or other African people. It's the people that are in possession of land that does not belong to them. And of course, they do not want to give it back. That is where we need to focus our attention. And we also need to look at how are we dealing with our own anti-Black racism, wherever in the diaspora you are, because it does exist. It exists in every place. And we need to stop acting as though South Africa is the only place that it exists.
Oh, that was so well said. In fact, people are saying Chanel is so right. While the system, let me put that up. Chanel is so right. While the system is the root cause of almost all these problems. And while I say that, I want to say big hello and welcome to Nadine Isaacs. Thank you so much. Oh my word, Nadine. What did I do? I think it was the time conversion. Oh
yeah, it was definitely. I was expecting to come on in about at 9:30 our time, so I really apologize. And
no, it's not your fault. I think I asked, and I was told it was 9:30. But did Shola do her due diligence to check that it is? You know, I should have just Googled the damn thing. Okay, but thank you so much.
And I confirmed with Kim, and she said the same thing. So I think she had exactly the same problems.
Yeah,
so.
she's going to be joining us shortly. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Really appreciate it. So actually, we just started off just sharing some thoughts on what's going on in South Africa. Farai was about to just give his, few thoughts on it, and then we'll come to you, Nadine, because we want to have an unfiltered, no bias conversation. And as Africans in the diaspora, we're just like, let's just share our thoughts first, and then we'll get into it. Farai,
okay,
please,
great.
what are your thoughts?
Oh, thank you, Shola, and good sharing and a very good point raised by my colleague here. And I do agree with most of what has been said, especially from the historical perspective of where South Africa gains its independence. And I think it's important, as Chanel frames it, that we shouldn't make it as a blame situation, but really try to understand the nuances that create the reality that we currently see in South Africa. And my understanding is that historically, it is correct that a lot of people tend to argue, or at least those that support the sort of current activities around the anti-immigrant sentiment, that there is some sort of a forgetful or amnesia as to the regional influences of that liberation struggle that was fought during that led to the freedom that we now see in terms of the post-apartheid phase. But and even though I do agree that many countries such as Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Angola, Mozambique, all the way up to Nigeria, but more predominantly the frontline states, faced economic consequences as a result of that sheer support. The incursions, the military incursions that happened in Mozambique during the time of Samora Machel were directly as a consequence of Mozambique's support to the anti-apartheid movement. And remember, those incursions were not just limited incursions to purely just military activity. There was assassinations, there were economic, because South Africa has been the economic power hub. And so I think that history is undeniable. It's quite well listed, it's quite registered. Anyone to argue it will be arguing with history. And if you're arguing with history, you're arguing with the wind, because it's something that just exists. But there's another element to that particular history that I'd like to point out that literally speaks to the present argument around immigration. So immigration in South Africa is not something that started today. It's not a question of the present. What has simply changed now is how it's interpreted. But South Africa's emergence as a regional power hub has relied constantly on regional labor. That is historic. If you read Charles van Sullen, who writes Night Train, which talks about the transportation of workers from Mozambique to South Africa, to the I think it was the Wits mines from the 90s, early 90s to about 1952. And it doesn't start there. Migration in terms of labor and as a point of attraction, it goes back at least 150 years. Because in order to industrialize South Africa, they couldn't, especially in the emergence of the gold revolution or the diamond revolution, the discoveries of Kimberley, they couldn't rely on just the staff levels that they had in South Africa alone. So they had to draw in a number of these countries. So the model, the economic setup as we know it, South Africa, was actually structured to absorb regional labor. And so countries like Malawi specifically, Tanzania, became labor-providing societies. That has been the history of it. Even my country alone, Zimbabwe, for instance, Zimbabwe used to be a labor taker, but equally a labor provider to the mines in this particular field, because the working consumption never quite happened. So in the very industrialization of South Africa as we know it, a lot of immigration inclusion was partly involved. And till today, that particular labor corridor speaks equally to a number of skills. So if you look at a number of teachers, if you look at the immigration numbers in South Africa, those presumed enlisted or registered people who are immigrants, about 1.9 million of them, that's a considerable number for a skilled working base. And what are the metrics that they're looking at? You're looking at your education sector. Quite a number of people from the region are taken in the education sector, including a number of well-represented academics from Nigeria as well. And that speaks across the board. If you're looking at engineering, if you're looking at the medical sector, these are critical skills that are contributing to the upscaling of and growth of that particular economy. And they are not there purely just to work and provide skill. They earn, they contribute to taxes, and equally benefit from whatever social benefits they may. And some to an extent don't even tap into it because they're good earners. And then, of course, there's the other category that we can look at, which is the asylum-seeking aspect, which falls under 300,000, if you will. It's not really a massive number. And if one is to argue, even if you're looking at refugee numbers or asylum-seeking numbers, South Africa doesn't actually carry the bulk of the continent. Actually, the top continent providers when it comes to refugee numbers is Uganda, which carries about 1.9 million people, followed by Ethiopia, which carries about a million, 1 million 2, and you go all the way to Kenya. These are in the millions. But we don't see that cultural sentiment of an anti-immigrant nature. And so it sort of makes you wonder why. And I think South Africa is quite unique in the sense that even when faced with these facts, it's not down to the citizens. It's really how the society itself is shaped. And I think why we see it now, if it wasn't an issue for the last 50 years, then clearly there is some correlation between the changing dynamics of inequalities that have persisted and what we're now seeing. So what are the drivers of this? And my argument is that the drivers of this are, of course, economic exclusion. And naturally, if you're in communities where there is high poverty and high inequality, you're going to look at the other. And there's a contribution of media framing in that. And me being in communications, I'm very fascinated and I like to focus on how arguments framed. And if you look at the media in South Africa, predominantly in the framing of immigrants, it associates immigrants to criminalization, to criminality, or it equally associates them to some sort of level of insecurity, which spreads the element of suspicion. Then thirdly, there is the political aspect of it, whereby you find that people in the political landscape tend to find they gain political mileage, if you will, or greater following by instead of focusing on the structural challenges within the country which deal with that underlying social inequalities, instead of responding to those structural issues, they respond to it through political narrative that others the immigrant. So and this is not unique to South Africa. We see it in the UK through the emergence of reform. We're seeing it in a lot of our European counterpart countries, where we're seeing a surge and a growth of an anti-immigrant sentiment, which is economically driven. So
I think you raise excellent points there, actually, because do you guys mind just muting because I know we have quite a. Does that sounds good? You raised some really good points there, Farai, and I think that it's it's a natural segue for Nadine to come in and either buttress what you're saying or give us a whole different perspective. Because Nadine, what Farai, Chanel, and Gloria have done is to kind of set the perspective of how Africans looking from the outside in are going, brothers and sisters in South Africa, what's going on? This is where we thought we were. This is a connection we have with you. And I think Farai bringing up the political framing, the media framing, as well as the economic downturn that makes people look at each other. I think that brings a really that this is exactly where I want to say to you and to Kim when she comes on what's going on. But let me play this. Let me because this is what everybody's seeing right now. If I can get So I have to ask Nadine, just coming in, or actually, I think Kim is here. Everybody's here. Hey, Kim. How are you? Thank you so much for joining. And I just want to say this is totally my fault. Somehow I thought you and I thought it was 9:30, and it turned out to be 8:30. God is good. What matters is that we're all here. And I just played that clip of seeing what looks like hundreds, if not maybe thousands, of South Africans marching. And my question to both of you, Nadine and Kim, but starting with you, Nadine, is before we start to try to frame what it is we're saying, can you please kind of articulate to us what the sentiment behind the march is? What is it that has motivated South Africans, these South Africans, to go on the streets and march? What is in their hearts? What is driving them? What's the pain behind this march?
So thank you, Dr. Shola, and I'm sorry I didn't get to hear the first two speakers, Chanel and Gloria, but I'm sure that we'll catch each other as the conversation goes on. So I had this conversation a few days ago with Kim, actually, and I want to say, as a Black South African living in Johannesburg, I live in South Africa. Unlike a lot of the trolls online are saying that none of us are South African. Well, actually, Kim and I are, and we live in South Africa, and we experience the maybe not to the full extent, but we experience life in South Africa as South Africans, with all its pressure points, with all its complexities, etc. So let me start off by saying that as a South African, and as a Black South African, and as a Pan-Africanist South African, I feel, from a personal point of view, I feel an incredible sadness and an incredible amount of shame at what I see on what I see on the screen and what I see happening. I don't feel that shame from the expression that our people are expressing their anger or their hurt or their upset. I feel, and so I want to start off by saying I do feel shame, and I feel the shame because what we are essentially doing is we are kicking, or we are punching downwards, or we are punching sideways. We are not punching where the true power is, and where the true power lies, and the true power that actually leads to the situation. I said to Kim a few days ago that these xenophobic outbursts or attacks are not new. They've been happening. They happened in like around about 2008. I'm not sure exactly the time, but they happened then. And every few years, it happens. Every few years we have this flare up, and this happens. But I think what I'm also, and I said it from the first time it happened in 2008, what I'm also not going to do is I'm not going to condemn poor Black South Africans for their anger. I'm not going to do that. I think their anger is legitimate. I think the focus of their anger, where they're choosing to place it, is incorrect. I think that is inappropriate. But the fact that they are angry is not inappropriate. And I think that I'm a middle class South African. I live a good life. I live in a comfortable neighborhood. So maybe I'm not affected by the day-to-day lived experiences of many of our people. The truth of the matter, as may have been touched, Black South Africans are being squeezed economically. Economically, we have a very high unemployment rate. We have the worst or the highest levels of inequality in the world. We have 30, 32, 33 years of so-called democracy and freedom, and which I call a dream deferred, because the promises of democracy have not materialized. Yes, we are in some ways. We cannot say we are not free, or that that nothing has changed since apartheid. Of course, it has. But I think that the full potential of South Africa and of the improvement of the lives of ordinary South Africans has not matured and has not reached the potential of what was promised. And I think what we are seeing in the streets, and also I think these clips on the streets, obviously they're showing you the hotbeds, but when we drive around Johannesburg, this is not what we're seeing on a daily basis. There's a lot of online rhetoric, a lot of online speaking, a lot of online agitation, but this is not what I see on a daily basis. But it is happening, and but I think the main thing is that South Africans feel squeezed in their country. From at the economic level that we are seeing these activities, I think that people are excluded from economic activity. Very high levels of unemployment, very high levels of poverty, very high levels. I mean, and let's just go into some of the examples. For instance, public schools.
Yep.
South African parents not being able to get their children every year into a public school, sometimes weeks after schools have opened. And who do they see in those public schools? They're not seeing rich immigrants. They're seeing poor African immigrants who have a space in the school. It's not right, but that's what they're seeing. They go to public hospitals. They wait for hours and hours and hours in public hospitals. Who are they meeting in those public hospitals? They're meeting pregnant African immigrants, or African immigrants who are accessing healthcare, legitimately so. And so I think that this is a situation where people are angry, but they're not fighting at the government, because these are structural failings, these are policy failings, these are government failings that is spilling out into communities where they are now expressing their frustration and expressing their anger. And there are people who are politicians who are exploiting this and who are capitalizing on this anger. And I don't want to go on too long, Dr. Shola, because I think you want everyone else to talk, and this is just sort of opening statements. But I also think that, when you look at the rest of Africa, and particularly, a few months ago, there were, because the West, particularly the US and Israel, are very angry at South Africa because of the ICJ case, and they have threatened and are actively engaged in undermining our country, in trying to bring instability into our country. And if you look, and this is not necessarily saying that this is a result of that, but if you look at other parts of Africa and the world, South Africa is one of the countries where we have incredible religious tolerance. So traditional terrorist attacks from Muslim extremists will not be believable in South Africa. However, tribal xenophobia will be. And so I also believe that the reason that we see these explosions every few years also has a lot to do with not just organic uprising, although that is legitimate. But I think it is exploited and it is used by political players who also are seeking to destabilize South Africa. And what do you do when you're trying to destabilize South Africa? First of all, here we're walking around with the moral high ground in terms of standing up to Israel, in terms of not being bullied by the US, etc. And what all of a sudden happens? A few weeks later, all of Africa is upset with us. All of Africa is angry with us. All of Africa is telling us how ungrateful we are and how and so it what it does do is it isolates us. It isolates South Africa. And so that's just a little bit of a nuance. It may sound like conspiracy, but it's a little bit of nuance that I think there is some mischief as well. But let me pause there and yeah.
Thank you for that, because you're saying that there are many moving parts and multiple nuances, because we all know multiple truths coexist. And I think that's what you're highlighting here, like we've heard from, all the other speakers. Kim, I have a question for you. Now, everyone, Kim Heller, she's a hell of an author. She's down to earth. If you aren't following her on X, you better follow her. That's where I met her. And Kim, I think that many people would say, Kim, you're a white South African. Aren't you part of the problem? Why aren't they looking at you? Why are they looking at all these Black South Africans? What would you say to that?
Well, Dr. Shola, it's been such an honor to be on a panel with such esteemed people and yourself. I respect you so deeply. And thank you for doing that. You stole the only line I really wanted to make in this whole interview, which is, what am I doing here as a white South African? And even to call me a white South African is the wrong terminology. Sorry, doctor. But when I do interviews, I always say, hi, my name is Kim Heller, and I'm a white settler in South Africa. Like every white person in South Africa or in Africa, none of us are indigenous to this land. In fact, rather, we have come here as the ultimate foreigners, as the illegal foreigners who were never invited to the continent, but we used the tools of colonialism to force our way in. And we stayed, and we stay still today. And so when I see the xenophobic, well, we shouldn't even call it xenophobic, we should call it Afrophobic attacks being launched against African brothers and sisters, I ask the question, why are you not attacking me? Because it is people like me that are the problem. It is people like me who have benefited from apartheid and colonialism, and we still enjoy the rich fruits of exploitation today. So what we see is a misdirection of anger towards people who are being scapegoated, when the whole system, as your previous speakers, I think Nadine also articulately, both Nadine and Farai said, the system is structural. We have never got rid of the architecture of colonialism and apartheid. I heard one of your earlier speakers speaking about Fanon. Within there lies the solution, because we are so far away from a decolonized Africa, from a free Africa. And in 1994, South Africa was touted as the miracle nation. Today, we are the most unequal nation in the world. And it's because people that look like me keep holding onto the means of production. We own the land. We own the narrative, which is something we don't speak about enough. And therefore, but what's happened, to be honest, in my reading, and the greatest author in the world to me and greatest activist was Steve Bantu Biko, who was, of course, assassinated by the white regime. He had to be, because his ideology was so potent that it would have destroyed the white supremacist attitude that still governs South Africa today. And he was saying the greatest tool in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And I'm afraid to say, and I do not mean to insult South Africans, but we have got colonization and the myth of white superiority is so entrenched, particularly in the older generation, that there's such a fear, and a justified fear, because apartheid was brutal. White people did what we see the Israelis now doing to the Palestinian people. And so the system was brutal. But what we have is a Black population that is scared to take on white power. And that is the truth. So what they do is they redirect that anger, which, as Nadine said, is legitimate, to the weakest, most vulnerable sector of society. And it is tragic. The last thing I want to say is that what we see, and I wrote an article about this a year ago, I must try and find it, is that I do feel greatly, and I cannot speak on behalf of Black South Africans. I cannot understand the pain. I'm on the other side. I'm the presser. Whether I'm progressive or not is irrelevant. The system rewards me. And but what I've said is that I feel a lot of pain for Black South Africans who have got a raw deal, because in apartheid, they were second-rate citizens. Even today in democratic South Africa, they are still second or third-rate citizens because they're still behind that of a white child. They are placed, the well-being of a Black child is well behind that of a white child. And now they're being uprooted in their mind by Black Africans. So that, I think, is how we need to interpret what's going on right now. Thank you very much.
Okay, Kim, you were cooking. You were cooking. People are saying here, thank you, Kim. They're like, Kim, please cook. You know what they mean. But I think what you just said is really powerful. In fact, every single one of you has really touched on a lot of these key points, because Chanel is absolutely right. This is not about ostracizing Black South Africans. That's not what, it's not just about us, but it is also trying to understand, listen, we see your pain, and to the point of Nadine, but your pain is being misdirected in the wrong, in the wrong place. And to the point of Farai, who says, hold up a second, what you're also reacting to is actually being influenced at a political level. It's being influenced by the economic structure that's been intentionally placed there to oppress you, and of course the media narrative. And to Gloria's point, we're like, Africans love South Africans. There's a connection there. So how can we possibly meet in the middle? Because everyone, it pains me. I don't know. I saw clips of South Africans going there. I mean, I would play it, but there's no point because we want to have a conversation. I'm sure you've all seen them. We've all seen clips of South Africans going into hospitals saying, if you're not South African, get out. We're like, this is not the right way to do things. We've seen clips of school children of Black Africans being pulled out of school, or that South Africans are demanding that they be pulled out. These are the kinds of things. I mean, there's no doubt, and again, to Nadine's point, there is no doubt that there is real pain. There's also no doubt that Black South Africans, especially working class, have felt that they are being, it's bad enough that they are not experiencing what should be real democracy, but they're constantly getting the short shrift here, right? And now the world is attacking them because they're trying to take back what has been taken from them, but they're going after the wrong people who actually haven't taken anything from them. And it's very, very dangerous. So I want to put this to the panel now, that how do we start to address this? Because I personally see nothing wrong in saying, I'm sorry, that is despicable. That's evil. Is it about balancing language? Because Chanel, for instance, when you said we shouldn't ostracize, Black South Africans, and I don't think anybody on here wants to do that. But how do we do it without, I don't know, sugarcoating or holding someone's hands? Because I don't know how to do that. If it's a family member, I'll curse them the heck out while loving them. So what do we mean by brothers and sisters? How can we work together? But at the same time, if I see you doing something wrong, I'm going to say that is wrong. But at the same time, I'm seeing the comments in my posts say, but you don't understand us. And we don't care if you call us xenophobic. We've been experiencing this for too long. Because I saw a clip that somebody said, okay, when all these Black nationals leave, when they go, would that fix your healthcare system? No. Would you all of a sudden get the businesses and the jobs that you said they've taken? No. So what exactly is the real issue? So let me just put it to the panel. Who wants to go first? I don't want to seem as though maybe Gloria. Gloria, what do you think?
Yeah. And I completely agree that we shouldn't ostracize South Africa. It's like, when you have a family member that is doing something that you're not happy with, you should let them know, with as much love as you can muster. I have had a direct experience. I have never shared this story, and I'm not going to right now, so I don't get emotional. But the body of somebody very close to me lies or rests in South Africa. Xenophobia did not directly contribute to what happened to him, but it definitely did indirectly. So that was pain that I managed, that we nursed for years. But in spite of that, I've had nothing but love for this beautiful, beautiful country with an amazing group of people. So, when you have people, I'm sorry?
I said beautiful people and culture.
Culture. I said, it's like one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in my life. It's on record, and the people just loved so deeply, and that was a beautiful thing. I went there twice because of the first time I went there based on demand. So it's a very personal thing, it's hurtful. It's deeply, it's concerning what is going on now. But despite all that, you see, I want to make reference to, and Kim, shout out to you. I literally opened my mouth when I heard you speaking. I said, wow, mind blown. Shout out to you. But when you think about what happened with the rumors about what Black South Africans were doing to Afrikaners and things like that, there's already that horrible, highly inaccurate reputation out there that's been put out by powerful people. And, with something like this being added to it, how do we fight that? Because now it's like there's more proof now that there's some hatred or something. We don't want that for South Africa. And I will acknowledge that South Africa does have a serious crime problem. It's a real one. It's real, and we're well aware of it. But I also want you to know that according to the World Prison Brief, the 2024 data, 89.5% of people in South African prisons are South African citizens. I don't say that to say, oh yeah, so it's all on you guys. No, we do have, there are people, foreign nationals that are doing things that they have no business doing. I say, lock them up. I say arrest them, get them deported if possible. Look at what is happening this week in Uganda. Ugandan authorities arrested 231 foreigners in a human trafficking and cyber scam operation. That included everyone, including foreigners that are not Black. So we want that. If foreigners are committing crimes in SA, any foreigners from Nigeria, Zimbabwe, anywhere, they should be arrested, prosecuted, deported through the law, through the courts, through the system. We're not here to protect criminals. Target the offenders, not their identities. Have stricter labor inspections. Fine and shut down employers who use undocumented labor to cut wages. Have community policing that people can actually trust. Use the people. You can get intel. You can resolve these tensions early. Have smarter border and document systems. Faster, more reliable ID verification to ensure that you're preventing identity fraud rings. Get information sharing across agencies to track all these organized networks that are doing terrible things, the money laundering, the stolen goods. You can have a pipeline to take care of that. Ensure that there is fair, consistent enforcement. Ensure that the law is being applied equally. No profiling, no collective punishment. I have mentioned and listed countries that bled for South Africa and saying they deserve acknowledgement. Yes, I stand on that. But I also want to say that South Africa deserves better than this moment. South Africa deserves better leadership, better policy, better use of the legal system, better education about its own history, but not through a mob, not through burning buildings and kicking children out of school. That's all we're saying.
Exactly. I agree with you. Chanel, we have a comment here that says, you sang, we fought, big difference. And I think this was alluding to me talking about, growing up in Nigeria, where we had all the free Winnie Mandela, all of that, right? So I think that this commentator is saying, well, you people sang, we fought. Can we bring some education in here, Chanel, for a second? Because I think that there are some people who don't understand that African countries did more than sing.
Well, it's documented just how intertwined the diaspora was in helping to raise awareness about what was happening in the United States. as far as the support of apartheid regimes. I mean, the United States was one of the last countries to withhold support from South African apartheidists. But the pressure campaign was on completely full from so many African Americans who were serious about making sure that apartheid ended, because we understood apartheid was, well, it was renamed, but we called it Jim Crow here in the United States. I mean, it's the exact same thing. And so I don't want to, by any stretch of the imagination, act as though I am born and raised in South Africa. I'm not. But my parents, my grandparents came from the segregated South, from Mississippi. I'm 2 generations from that. 1 generation from sharecropping. My grandmother worked on a farm and was a sharecropper in Jim Crow, Mississippi. So I really do understand what that's about. I also want to bring some clarity to, you know, here in the United States, when I first heard about this whole idea of this white, first of all, the idea that we call it a white genocide says so much, because a genocide is a genocide is a genocide. The idea that we need to separate out those who are supposedly being killed talks a lot about the caste system that exists and whose lives we decide to cherish and whose lives do not. And so the lie that has been propagated by AfroForum and that has been brought to the forefront of American politics through this administration that we have, where Donald Trump is the president, and Elon Musk, who again left apartheid South Africa and is now here in the United States, along with Peter Thiel, has bankrolled the president. And now we have white Afrikaners or white settlers who are coming from South Africa to where? To the United States of America. And I just want to be clear that for South Africans, this lie will possibly cost the South African people the lives of over 600,000 people will die. That's what is being suggested because of the monies that would be withheld for critical AIDS medicines as a result of a lie that honestly, I really do believe that a political party like AfroForum should really be looked at as a terrorist organization, because what they are doing, in fact, is putting the lives of South African people in jeopardy. They are a foreign actor. Whenever you would go to another country and try to lobby another country to cut critical funding, well, this is what ended up happening. Even if they did not do that directly, what happened is that critical funding was cut off of the lie that South African people are being genocided. And I think it's important for us to understand that for a people who have been used to being able to take advantage of other people, the idea of equality does feel like an attack. So the idea that land that you got, that you should not have gotten, that was stolen land, might actually be reappropriated and given back to the people whose land it actually belongs to, that would feel like an attack for people who aren't interested in living freely in an equal society. And I really feel like we really do need to focus our attention on organizations like AfroForum and their ilk, because there are organizations that exist like that here in the United States who are doing a lot of damage to the people who are going to be most affected by it. But yes, to your point, Dr. Shola, the African American community worked tirelessly alongside South Africans to ensure that the apartheid regime failed. But that's not to say that we should not fully talk about the price that South Africans paid. None of this would have ever been possible without South African people laying their lives down on the line, because they were there on the front lines of apartheid. They fought, they bled, they died, and most importantly, they have dealt with the backlash and the realities of living in an apartheid country. And what we understand is that it's more than just economic. Like you said earlier, it is a psychological, a mental issue that we have to begin to overcome. And we don't overcome it by fighting one another. We overcome it by understanding who the enemy is and rooting out that as much as we can.
No, I really like the point you raised, because by talking about, I agree with you, they should be proscribe the terrorist organization, AfriForum, right? But by pointing them out, when you said that, what came to my mind is, hold up a second. The world can see masses, and it looks like masses of working class South Africans on the streets and doing these things that we're all going, whoa, why are you doing that? When the reality is that there are organizations, platforms, individuals behind the scenes, behind the camera, like AfriForum, doing far worse. And they're literally instigating what we're saying, those that they are oppressing with the structural system. They're the ones causing even more harm, but the attention and the light isn't on them. Do you agree, Farai?
Absolutely. Sorry, I was a bit muted there. I'm not sure if you can still hear me.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Yeah. I actually definitely do agree. I mean, NGOs like AfriForum and such institutions of that nature do it's part of their role, isn't it, to perpetuate this narrative that there's a continuation of whiteness of power and their own representation as to not divorce themselves from the apartheid issue. There is no reconciliation, really, if there's the existence of AfriForum, because it means that you're not fully equal or appreciate that there is a rainbow nation and that your interests will equally be represented. Otherwise, why would they need to exist? Their argument is that we're there to represent a minority group, and the minority group here in question is white. So if you believe in the rainbow country, in the story of a rainbow nation, if that story does continue to exist, why would they need to be AfriForum? Why would they need to be a political movement such as Freedom Front Plus, who generates its foundation from apartheid?
Right.
And why would debating, be it the histories, the curriculum of an entire education system be so problematic to a particular group whose containment, whose judgment of that history is particularly negative and honest and truthful? But that particular reform allows us to actually confront these truths, because if we are to appreciate that the Rainbow Nation story is true, then it means that restorative justice must equally take course, not only in the economic, but equally in the academic, as well as in the scholastic. But if those areas of decolonization have not been met, then it's very difficult for us to argue that South Africa as an institution, as a country, is completely free or completely decolonized. Because the infrastructure that we see economically, that landscape has not shifted. We've seen improvements, but if you see that, for example, we've not seen improvements in terms of the number of universities that equally cater to the majority of the students in South Africa. There's a large shortage in terms of student intake, but it's not to suggest that the economy cannot absorb or has no capacity to build. The question is, where is this money being concentrated? And so I do appreciate that when a lot of these protesters go out there and argue their case, it is true that we should always appreciate that they're going through real stuff. But where I slightly differ with a part of my colleagues, many of my colleagues here, is to not be able to condemn an act. An act produces a fact. So if you go out there and you kill someone in the name of you misunderstanding, well, I don't care if you misunderstand it. You've acted on your misunderstanding. You should be held accountable. So yeah, you can be angry, but if that anger results to death, I think before we even negotiate, you should be condemned, and there should be processes. But the problem I'm having is that there's an implicit institutional acceptance for this behavior. Because where would it make sense that the leader of a group that is anti-immigrant be found taking pictures with police and it be deemed not systematic, even though there's no written policy to advocate that, well, this is part of your country's policy? And equally, when the president condemns it, he puts a caveat in there on the Monday when he condemns, by the way, he condemns this anti-immigrant sentiment, and he says it's xenophobic. You cannot go out there in the streets. But he equally puts a caveat in there. He says, but you foreigners must respect us. Where have we disrespected you to begin with? So there's an institutional implicit bias. So which tells me that, one, there's a failure in political communications, because clearly you can see fault but are not doing nothing about it. There is no policy to, if you realize that there is a problem, There should be policy that speaks directly to it. There should be clear guidelines on political communications in terms of those who belong in their party. But because there's a struggle, the ANC is losing votes, they're scrambling for whatever narrative will help them advance it, which is fundamentally wrong. So in those instances, I cannot say I do not blame. I must blame because you know better. The institutions should know better. And for those that are victims of it, well, you were asking earlier, how do we communicate better? Well, if the institutions that are meant to govern communications in the manner in which they are taught, and equally in the manner in which they can be persuaded otherwise, because if you recall, in 1963, when the UK government requested the Polish people to come here, there was a deliberate policy to create tolerance within that society. Now, if they're not creating tolerance, now I can understand the apartheid capitalist system when it brought in blacks, we were all cast as one. And it was purely for one reason. It was to sustain a capital system that benefited the industrialization of South Africa. Now, in a post-apartheid country such as South Africa, which knows that there is that history, why is this not in their history books? It should be obvious, shouldn't it? So my only moment of departure here is the institution and the institutional responsibility for government, for media, which should know better. Surely, if you sit on you don't need a deep dive into university archives to be able to understand the differences of these arguments. You can't simplify a narrative or singular or create single narratives without agitating society. Yet your duty, your responsibility, is to enlighten, because that particular enlightenment shapes societal perception. Now, so if you are not doing it, who do you expect to do it? Now, clearly, if media is complicit, and the government is equally complicit because it needs to sustain its power, and equally the business institutions are equally complicit because they need to equally sustain and draw in labor. Society is a victim. But then, how do I communicate with that society if no matter what I say, they are living in an environment that says you are right?
I think you have raised really, really strong, valid points, Farai. And I think, again, another real good segue to Nudin, because Nudin, with all those points, with this systemic institutional failure that is clearly failing South African people, which has led to them wanting to take action, even if we say it's being misdirected to the wrong people, somebody has to take responsibility for redirecting that. So my question to you is, what are the demands? What right now are the demands of the March on March, protesters? What is it that they want, and who are they expecting this change from? If as Farai has said, the institutions they ought to be able to rely on are not doing so.
Yeah, and I want to say, first of all, going back to your original question for the second round of discussion, and to Farai's point, absolutely, we have to. The starting point of any discussion about what's going on currently needs to be condemnation. We need to condemn what is happening. We need to condemn it as being inhumane, as being un-African, as being criminal. Because regardless of your feelings, as Farai says, if you kill somebody, if you assault somebody, that's a crime. You are behaving as a criminal, and that needs to happen. And as much as we explain or we bring nuance, it does not mean that we should not be frank in our language that says, this is wrong, you are not doing this in my name, I don't stand with you in what you like. I don't stand with you on going to pull women out of hospitals. I don't stand with you on intimidating little children at school. That is wrong. It's unacceptable. It's inhumane. I mean, where is our humanity? So that's the first thing. But I do think I want to add to what Farai says. And I agree with everything with regard to the structural power being in white hands. But for a moment, let's step away from that, because and I love Kim very much, but she knows it and she'll be the first one to say it. But because we can't expect much different from white people in South Africa. They're doing exactly what we expect them to do, and we cannot appeal to their humanity. and we cannot appeal to their morality for equality, etc., etc. So in this case, as Steve Biko said, it's a case of black man, you're on your own. Okay, and that is the situation. But I want to also say, as a South African, and I don't even think I've even told Kim the story. Do you know that in South Africa, in Johannesburg, Dr. Shola, that there are areas of Johannesburg that are no-go zones for South Africans?
No.
Do you know that there are areas in Johannesburg, like Hillbrow, that are no-go zones for the South African police?
Why?
Because they are such hotbeds of crime, and those are communities that are now dominated by different African communities, not South African, and they are hotbeds of crime. And I have a personal experience of it, in that in 2019, my sons happened to be these privileged boys who didn't think that they thought they were immune to such things, and ventured into such an area and ended up in hospital for several days, being beaten. My one son ended up in ICU, being beaten to almost to death simply for their cell phones and their wallets. And this is not saying, again, going to Gloria's point, this is not African crime. This is crime. Okay, this is crime in South Africa. We are all victims to crime, and the point is that the laws are there. If you look at South Africa, if you look at our laws, if you look at our policies, we have some of the most sophisticated policies, progressive policies, but they're not being implemented. And going back to the point that I was wanting to make when I said I don't expect much more from white people, but the failing I want to put at the door, at the foot and at the door of the ANC government of this country. Because, and I'm saying our Black leadership needs to take accountability. We can't expect more from white people. They're not going to do much for us. But our Black leadership needs to take accountability for the state of this country, for the state of, because number one, we dither. We have this thing of dithering. We indecisive. We say we have a policy on land, and then we backtrack when white people get unhappy. We say we have a policy on Black economic empowerment, and then we backtrack when a few white people say, oh, but this is reverse discrimination. Well, what do you expect? Don't you expect there to be redress from apartheid? Don't you expect things to change? So how do you expect apartheid to end, but as a white person, your life to be unaffected? And then people say, well, I didn't, I wasn't part of apartheid. Why should I pay for it? Well, I wasn't. I was born in apartheid. I didn't do anything to deserve being treated as a third-class citizen, as a Black person. But I live with those consequences. My children live with those consequences. Generations after us will live with the consequences of apartheid. So change has to happen. It's unpopular, and when it comes to specifically the issue of migration or immigration in South Africa, you're absolutely right. We don't go after people coming from the US, particularly white people, or coming from Europe, etc. That's not where people are fighting. They're not fighting those foreigners. When they talk about we want Amakwerekwere to leave, they're not talking about white foreigners. They're talking about Black foreigners. And that is the sad thing, because where is the power? The power is not with those Black foreigners who may be working in my garden, a Malawian working in the garden, or somebody working in a mine. That's not where the power is. That's not your enemy. That's not the person who's taking the lunch off your table or the food out of your mouth. So we need to hold our Black politicians accountable for the situation. We need to hold them accountable also, that when, for instance, when we have this influx of illegal immigration, even if the numbers are not high, but if people are not happy about it, and anyway, no country should tolerate it. If that happens, deal with it. Deport people. But what happens in South Africa? The minute the South African government wants to do something, whether it's about this ZEP, Farai, I'm picking on you as my Zimbabwean brother, but whether it's about ZEP, for the Zimbabwean program, or it's about Nigerians committing crime, or it's about Somalians running tuck shops that sell food that poisons our children. And the minute our government says, okay, we're going to do something, we have African governments condemning them, and our government backs down and they don't follow through. Other African countries do it. They are not shy about deporting people who misbehave in their countries. Our government did this. Then we want to be politically correct. We want to have this politics of politeness. And so we dither. And in that dithering, we are not decisive. We don't show decisive leadership. We don't show the clear line between right and wrong. And that is with our own citizens, whether it's crime committed by our own citizens, or whether it's crime committed by foreign nationals, or whether it's actually people who are in this country illegally. And so I think that this is a firm, it's an issue of a lack of leadership, of a failing of leadership. And when I say leadership, we don't expect to be led by white people. We expect our Black government, who we voted for, who we've trusted for 32 years, to get their act together, to put their egos down. But they have become they've become a comprador class, essentially. They are not serving the interests of Black South Africans, because in this, and even in saying to, it's like having two naughty kids or two kids fighting in your house and one hits the other and you say, oh, you shouldn't, that's not nice. No, you should be firm about the fact that that behavior is unacceptable. And you should say, I'm willing to listen to your grievances. I'm willing to deal with your grievances. But your behavior is unacceptable, it's criminal, and you're going to face the law. And also, sorry, just the last thing I want to say on this. This issue is a recurring issue, Dr. Shola. Okay? And every time we have such a flare-up, we have our government pacifying people, okay? And what happens after that? We're going to talk. We're talking to the communities. This is going to happen. And what happens? Nothing happens. And then a few years later, we have another flare-up. And then a few years later, we have another flare-up. This is a long time coming. And it's not the first, and it won't be the last, as long as our government does not act in a decisive manner and decide, are they actually going, if they're sitting on the pot, are they going to actually do something, or they must get off? And that's basically it. And what we're having is, I also think there's a level of vigilantism where people are taking the law into their own hands now because they feel like the people in authority are not doing it. And it's not right, but that's the reality of what's happening.
In fact, that's exactly what I was about to say, because when you said there's a vacuum in the leadership because the government is not stepping in, nobody that should be doing something, who've been elected in power doing something. Now we have masses of working class Black South Africans who are saying, what? If I can't trust the police, if I can't trust the government, if I can't trust the people who ought to step in and maybe go to is it Hillborough, you said, where Black South Africans can't even go? Those kind of places, then it means that the working class Black South African is feeling then we now have to go clear up that place ourselves. And that is why we are seeing some of these clips. This is why we're seeing some of these things. It doesn't make it right. Because again, a lot of what we're saying is that they are picking on random Black Africans. Even when the Black African says, here's my ID, this is what, I'm here legitimately. They go, well, who gave you the right to be here? So everything you're saying, Farah and Nodine and Gloria and Chanel, absolutely spot on. I think I can see comments on all of this. But Kim, let me come to you, because Kim thought, oh, you know what, I'm just going to say one thing and Charlotte's going to leave me alone. That's not going to happen. So Kim, let me put this to you, because Nodine said something really, really factual and on point. Black South Africans are not expecting jack all from white settlers. And that is because Black South Africans know that white settlers know that the system was created for them. They're benefiting from the system. So why the heck would they want to change it? Now, as we've just heard you speak so frankly and quite frankly, I mean, you've broken any kind of, myth and thinking white South Africans out there simply just sitting there and enjoying themselves, because you refer to yourself as a settler. And you said rightly that you're benefiting from the system. So is Nadine right when she says Black South Africans can't expect anything from white South Africans? And as a white South African, aka settler, what do you think white South Africans should be doing if they're truly invested in South Africa?
Yeah, white South Africans, I've just published my second book on white supremacy and ongoing white arrogance in South Africa. And I've come to the sad conclusion that white people have no moral compass in this country, because if we had, we would have returned land, we would have transformed the economy, we would have gone down on our knees and begged for forgiveness. But what we've done as a group is that we have just carried on with our privilege as if it's due to our own hard work rather than the deliberate, brutal exploitation of Black people. Our fortunes have been made on Black pain, and we are not going to change. There are very few white people in this country who will look at this, and we have white people who are now given the status of refugees to go to America. And I did an interview where a lot of the Afrikaners took offense, which is not really my problem, where I said these people are fleeing not because they're refugees, but because they're racists. The thought of actually being under a Black government is too much for their white sensitivities. They still resent that. And the sad thing is that Nelson Mandela was far too kind to white people. He extended a hand of friendship, and what did we do? We bit that off. So I wanted to answer your question on the solutions. The solution in this country, we must face it. The solution is to return land, to shift the cultural framework. The fact that there's no pride of place for African languages in our schools is shocking. The fact that a minister of education of ANC government said we can't put into the syllabus the work of radical African writers because it may upset the white child. That is absolutely sickening. So the whole cultural framework has to be changed. The cultural erasure, the epistemological erasure of Black wisdom has to change. That's the solution. We have to change the whole system. We have to dismantle it. So if every single so-called foreign national, and I don't even want to speak to about African brothers and sisters like that, but let's say every African went back to their so-called lands, countries, the lot of Black South Africans would not be improved. They would be very bitterly disappointed because the system has to be dismantled. And I always think this is very interesting politics, because the land question in South Africa, which is at the core of equality, we can see it's fading from the agenda. And what's happening now? Just before an election, very interesting, that xenophobic Afrophobia raises its ugly head. It's very tactical. And I think the fact that politicians are using this explosive issue to cultivate votes is shameful. My last comment on this, Julius Malema, who's been given so much terrible press in the white mainstream media, has come up because he's got a very strong Pan-Africanist solution. And to be truthful, the only way to get rid of white supremacy is Black unity. And trust me, the whites know this. So they'll do anything in their power to create Black division. Now, Julius Malema, the so-called villain of the Western world on Trump, has said, what do we do? Let's document all so-called illegal foreigners. So we know that they're part of our system. Let's manage that. Yeah. And I think we are in the situation, we have to respond to this with humanity, because Africa is the continent of humanity and it's becoming the continent of inhumanity. And it's not being steered by the Black man. It's being steered by a system of whiteness in the headquarters of Western capitals. And we should be very honest about this.
Well said. In fact, I can see you shaking, Gloria. I can see you shaking, because that's what are we adding? Because everything you just said now is absolutely spot on. I agree. I absolutely agree. So I know we're going to round off soon. I cannot thank you all enough for making the time on a Thursday. Today's Thursday. I'm getting old. On a Thursday evening to spend with me. What I'm hoping to do is have more conversations like this, because what you have all said has really brought education to the forefront. And Kim, you were saying you don't understand why you're here. Everything that just came out of your mouth is the exact reason why you're here. And especially because as a white South African, you have a perspective here in recognizing where power lies, and that where that power lies is in the wrong hands. And having Nadine here to share your perspective, Nadine, your passion. Oh, honestly, if I had a thermometer, it was way there. Your passion in articulating what is going on in your country with your people, while balancing that with condemning what is clearly, criminal acts, but recognizing the true suffering. This is what we're talking about. I opened my mouth when you said, "Sure, do you know there are places in Joburg or in South Africa that I can't go to?" I'm thinking, how? Well, what do you mean? Do you actually? I was thinking maybe you meant that that land,
Orania.
Yeah,
Orania.
Yes. Because even the existence of that place makes my blood boil. Like, what? How can that place exist after apartheid? So I thought that was what you meant. So you talking about the fact that Black South Africans can't go to places like that because it is riddled with crime, and that these criminals, some of them are foreign, like they are Black Africans. But you said this is not about foreign or native, it's crime. But I think from what I'm seeing online from the for those who are part of the March and March protest, they're saying, I think that their own lived experience, because no, do you remember you mentioned that I think you described yourself as middle class. So you are not necessarily going to be facing those areas on a daily basis. However, working class South Africans who have to live with this existence on a daily basis will have a whole different experience. That does not, however, justify, to you, Farah, and your point, that means you go and pick on random Africans and go, yeah, then that means you're a criminal. Because again, those are the clips that we are seeing. It feels very much like, Africans are being randomly picked. And, Chanel and Gloria, to both your points as well, the reality is, I think, Gloria, I love the fact that you absolutely, you broke down what needs to be done. It's okay, you have mass immigration. Okay, this is how you should handle it. Crime, this is how you should handle it. And I don't think you are suggesting that it is easy or simple. What you're saying is that there are systems that you can create, to Kim's point, dismantle what is here because it's not working, and create the system that can work, but don't alienate and ostracize, right? Because to do that will go against exactly what Kim is saying. Kim says that white people know that a unified Black Africa will bring an end to the system of whiteness, right? And so by this Afrophobia and everything else we're seeing, that feeds into the Black disunity that the system of whiteness needs. And I love the point you raised, Chanel, about how recognizing the roles that these so-called institutions like AfriForum are playing, because it to a large extent, it seems to me like, because there's a control over what Black South Africans are allowed to know, so in terms of knowledge or education and the information that is being fed, going outside South Africa to paint this picture of, do you know Black South Africans are committing white genocide? Many of us, and I'm sure all of us, as soon as I heard that, I just went, that's bullshit. They're doing nothing of the sort. That's utter nonsense. What do you mean white? You people are getting on my last God-given nerves. Now, for those who were on the, well, I don't know, and those who were like, yes, white people experiencing such oppression, now watching Black South Africans attacking Black people, they'll go, well, didn't we tell you? Again, and I think we're all kind of saying the same thing, that unfortunately, the legitimate concerns of working class Black South Africans about crime, about mass immigration, about unemployment, about broken healthcare system, about corrupt government, and the way they've misdirected their anger is actually feeding into a bigger plot. And this is not conspiracy theory, because I think we're all talking about the same thing, that there's something more going on out there, right from how dare you, South Africa, bring a case against Israel, to the system of whiteness that don't want to be broken because the more they fight amongst each other, the more we white people can relax. So I hope that those who are watching are able to connect the dots with all of the nuggets you've all shared today. But I want to give you all maybe like a minute to wrap up and say something that maybe you didn't get a chance to say before, just from what you've been hearing. Starting with you, Gloria.
Free Julius Malema. I do want to also beg our wonderful brothers and sisters of South Africa, let's put some energy on that. That's a man who is, fighting for your equality and things like that. So I love, I appreciate the patriotism. Don't get me wrong, you standing up for your country, but I'm also saying let's channel that, into things like that. But thank you so much, Dr. Shola, for having me. This is such an incredible honor. So pleased to meet each and every single one of you. I've learned so much. Thank you.
Excellent. Chanel. Oh, mute.
Oh, I also want to say not only free Julius Malema, but free Kemi Seba, who, from my understanding, is in a South African prison right now. And if he gets deported to Benin, he will surely be tortured and killed for the work that he's doing to break the net of French exploitation in Francophone countries. We see what's been happening in Mali and in the Sahel region. And we also understand that without the exploitation of these African countries, that France falls into a third world country overnight. Their entire economic system is based upon the exploitation of African people and resources, African resources. And so, people like Kemi Seba need to be protected at all costs. And the South African people have an assignment, and that's to make sure that he continues to do the work that he's been doing, because we are in a fight for our lives. And I think that we all have to ask each other, what do we gain from our division? What do we gain from pointing the finger at one another, and who benefits from that? And that's not to say that we don't have a point and that we don't have to hold each other accountable. But I think the truth of the matter is that the only people that benefit from our division are the same people who have also always historically benefited from that. And so we have to make sure that we learn to work together, listen to each other, support one another, and have our best interests at heart. The only way forward is together.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Kim, what would you like to say to wrap up?
Thank you. I think the issue is to understand the power of unity. As a white person, if I can say anything to African people, it would be unify, 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 because the Black, that's really the only thing. And I also think that across the world, we need to understand that Black lives somehow seem to have less currency and value, and that has to shift. So I think the message and these type of programs is very important. Black life isn't cheap. Africans themselves need to understand that. And perhaps the last thing is, a lot of what's happening in Africa is caused by white foreign influence. Even the borders that we speak of that separate African brothers from African brothers and families. I mean, these colonial borders were developed by people who don't care about you. The whole geography of Africa, the whole mental landscape has to shift dramatically. Thank you very much. What an honor, and what a beautiful, and I noticed so many wonderful women on the panel, which is such a lovely thing. Not to undermine my Farah, who I respect deeply, but lovely. Thank you to everybody.
Oh, thank you so much, Kim. Farai, thank you, our brother. What would you like to wrap up?
And as someone who grew up around women, it's always a pleasure. I learn more, and I work around women, so it's always good to because you guys you're challenging in terms of and there's no fighting a lot. These days we're living in the Andrew Tate world, so it's better here. It's warmer. It's good exchanges. Firstly, I want to say thank you, Dr. Shola, for having me, and thank you, Kim, for making the recommendation. And it's such a pleasure to meet you all here. And I think as parting shots from me, I think I'll focus on what the three myths are. Firstly, there is no such thing in South Africa about criminality being produced by 4.6% of your population. You have a population of 62 million people. There is no way that 60% of crime can be committed by 4.5% of your population. It's a mathematical anomaly. It's impossible. So to those that are pushing that particular number, please, if you have not finished maths, go back to school and then make your case. Second argument is the economic argument. Ladies and gentlemen, immigrants cannot control your economy because, like I said, it's a statistical anomaly. So you have to go back to the structural questions that your forefathers fought for. Right? If you're not going to listen to me, at least read your books, because it's in the books. It's in the arguments, the Freedom Charter. What was the argument of the Freedom Charter when they introduced it? It was about economic emancipation. What was the argument that Steve Biko proffered? What are the arguments that Thabo Mbeki, who was your president, equally failed to make that case, which is quite surprising. But these are things that your country has gone through. So surely we should be competent enough, if we are to go out in public and make protest, the least we should do is read our own story first. So that if you argue with someone outside of it, like I'm seeing on the comment section, the least you can do is have the dexterity to defend yourself, not to be educated about your own history. So we deal with that particular. And then the last point I would make as a parting shot is immigration, for history's sake, is what created South Africa, is what made it industrialized. The reason why South Africa is the most industrialized country in the world is because on the continent, I was about to flip there, on the continent, is because it drew from open labor societies like Tanzania, like Zimbabwe, and it was deliberately done. And this was done for 150 years. So immigration to South Africa is as new as, I don't know what comparison I can give. It's as new as Daniel Hazen, being Minister of Agriculture. White power has always existed. It's nothing new. Right? What may be happening here is that we are interpreting it incorrectly. So there's an interpretation problem, not a migration problem. Okay? And the underpinning immigration issues that are being discussed are really on the peripheries. They're marginal, they're political. Okay? Because the numbers do not support the case. And even if you are to look at the numbers that are being discussed, you're looking at less than 500,000 people. And if we are to argue that there are 10 million, I would like to find any numbers that suggest that. I have looked high and below for any statistical data by the South African government that can evidence what these people are arguing. It does not exist. Now, if the government doesn't know about it, how do they? And maybe as a final point, crime is indeed an unadulterated issue because it's based on the societies you live in. People steal and kill from people they're closest to. But just because I live in Exeter here in England and I see crime or white people and I see it constantly, and all of a sudden my judgment is that the rest of England and the rest of all white people are this way. You know what they call me here? A bigot. Thank you.
Well said, Farai. Well said. Nadine, to you, the last word. How would you like to wrap this up?
No, I think I just want to say, and this sometimes it sounds far-fetched, but we always have to remind people that, we need to look at where the power lies and we need to redirect our energies towards taking power from where it truly lies. And instead of fighting for the crumbs that fall onto the ground, we should be, in South Africa particularly, we should be fighting for the cake. Because when we have the cake, a neighbor from Zimbabwe, a neighbor from Malawi, a brother from Nigeria is not a threat to me. Because what we are now right now is we think that our struggle is about limited resources. But it's not about limited resources. It's about the uneven distribution of the resources. And the other thing is that, and just to go to Chanel's point, and this is a point we make in our progressive spaces where we speak, our struggles are interrelated. Our struggles are connected. We have the same enemy. We have the same oppressor. We have the same empire stepping on our necks. And we need to find unity amongst ourselves as Black people, as Africans, as people in the diaspora. And we need to find unity amongst ourselves as working class people of all races, in order to make this world a better place for all of us. And just always also, I can never take a space without shouting out solidarity to all the struggles of all our people happening around the world. DRC, DRC, Congo, Sudan, Palestine, Cuba, Venezuela. These are connected struggles. We have the same enemy. We have the same empire stealing from us. And we have to, as Kim says, we have to find our strength in unity. And this is not placades. This is not just to say nice words. But this should become our lived experience. And Dr. Shola, thank you so much. I respect you so much. I've been following you for so long, and I almost am like a fangirl, So I really respect you. And I was very intimidated when Kim said, "Come on," and I was like, "No, am I good enough?" But I just want to say, I really respect you. I respect your activism. I respect your speaking truth to power, and it's so fantastic to meet other activists on this. Farai, Kim talks very fondly of you, but just to meet you all and to meet other activists and other like-minded people in a world that we have to navigate that is so muddied right now, and we have to find our true north. The world is so immoral. We have to find our moral compass. And as our fellow South Africans, I want to say, don't let your suffering strip you of your humanity. And yeah, thank you so much.
Oh my God, guys! This was ordained by God. I really needed this conversation, because sometimes I think that one of the reasons I do this is because I won't lie to you. Can I be honest with you? Half the time I am tempted to throw my remote control at the TV screen when I'm hearing these people driving me nuts. The only reason I don't do it is because there's a cost of living crisis. And if I break my TV, I can't buy a new one. Okay. So I have to be realistic. And the other side said, I want these conversations, but I am not necessarily in the space where these conversations are happening. So it means we have to create the conversation, the space, so that we can all come in together and have this conversation. And I won't lie, this was so much more than I don't know what I was expecting going in. I wanted education, and I'm getting so much from you guys. And now I feel so much more encouraged to have more conversations just like this. I hope there'll be more conversations about South Africa, part 2, part 3, part 4. But I can't thank you enough for taking the time on a Thursday to spend with us. I really appreciate it. Everybody send love. I can see fire and 100% and all that. Very, very good. Excellent. That's in Nigerian me speaking now. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Farai. Thank you, Nadine. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Chanel. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Please follow each other if you aren't already doing so, and stay connected. Thank you. Okay, everyone, send love. Send love as our guests depart now. And they're giving us so much of their time. Truly grateful as they leave now. Guys, just feel free to just go to that the button space. Listen, people, thank you so much for spending Thursday with me as always. I hope we got a lot out of that. I hope we got a lot of education. And all of your comments and thoughts, please, by all means, let's carry on with this conversation. It is so important. And if there's anybody else you think would be great for me to, have a panel discussion with, please let me know. You can see my details there. You can DM me on any of my social media platforms, or send me an email on hello@drshola.com. I hope this has been a worthwhile evening of, discussion and conversation for you to engage in and listen in. I just know that they're not having this kind of conversations on mainstream media, and it's so important that we have them. Thank you again for spending this evening with me, and I will see you on Tuesday, same time, by God's grace, 7 p.m. GMT. God bless, and see you soon.
Thank you for watching. Like, comment, share, and subscribe.